go to East Africa. The largest economy, Kenya, is going through some very rough patch at the moment, 1%. 1.1% GDP contraction in the third quarter of last year, and its sovereign debt now at a troubling level. Last week, the NJOROGE-LED central bank left interest rate unchanged as banks' earnings for 2020 are unimpressive, to put it mildly. Joining me to chat to some of the current developments out of Kenya is the CEO and founder of Rich Frontiers Management, Aly Khan Satchu, this evening in Nairobi. Ali, good evening, my friend. Thanks for making the time.
It's a pleasure. Good evening, boss.
Thank you. It's good to see you on the show. Drill down a little bit into this latest GDP for us. Are there any positives across the overall 1.1% negative reading?
So we've had two negative readings for the last two consecutive quarters. However, the minus 1.1% was sequentially better than the previous quarter. So technically, not in a recession, though a lot of headlines said we were. The strongest, if you decompose the GDP, the strongest part of the economy was agriculture. And agriculture, I'm including floriculture, I'm including tea, I'm including coffee and horticulture. And that was very strong. And had we not had that outlier segment, it would have been a very poor show all round. You know, the takeaway from that is across the continent, agriculture has been the mainstay in this COVID economy. I saw data out of South Africa that they exported the most citrus ever on record. And for Kenya, the next important date is Valentine's Day. Of course, we supply most of the world's roses, and Kenya's hoping for a strong performance on Feb 14.
So what about the latest Kenyatta's administration's talks with the G20 and the Chinese directors over debt? We just get the news this evening that Chad, Nigeria's northern neighbor, one of Nigeria's northern neighbor, and Ethiopia have applied under the G20 DSSI program right now. It looks like the club of sovereigns in Africa who will be asking for rescheduling are climbing. The list is increasing by the day. But talk to us about Kenya, the talks with the G20 and the Chinese.
So I think just to quickly touch on your Chad and Ethiopia story, I think Ethiopia has thrown a curveball to a lot of people. I mean, the bond is now trading at about 8.85%. Prices dropped 200 basis points since Thursday. And essentially, Ethiopia, which is not the smartest at signaling markets, it tends to be a little clumsy, as you probably noted with the press releases. But you know, it's a harbinger. It's telling us that, you know, these two are just the beginning. In Kenya's case, we've applied for the interest deferral. The Chinese as well, I believe, have given us an interest waiver for the next few months. But, you know, you can keep kicking this can down the road, person, but we're running out of road here. If you just have to look at the numbers, it's going to take a Hail Mary pass to get out of this, and I don't think we're going to see that kind of thing. So I think essentially Kenya, within, I would say, 12 to 18 months at the most, is going to have to do the same as Chad and Ethiopia, unfortunately. Morgan Stanley put out a report today where they gave 3 tiers to African countries. Nigeria, you'll be glad to hear, was in tier 1 and not under the same type of pressure as Kenya, which was in tier 2. Likes of Zambia and Lebanon were in tier 3. But basically, Morgan Stanley was saying you would need a lot of help from the IMF, which we're getting. We're a very key country in the geo-economic puzzle on this part of the continent. So I expect the IMF to step up, though I really think some of their economic projections are really off the wall. But I expect the IMF to step up, but it will need a very benign backdrop for Kenya to escape this situation at this year.
So, Ali, how fragile is Kenya's fiscal position right now?
So the fiscal position, look, we've had a massive undershoot in tax collection. As you'd expect, the economy, we've just discussed the fact it's had 2 quarters of contraction. And if you think you're going to collect more tax in such an environment, then you don't understand how taxes work. So, we've got an undershoot going on. The government has so far been popping happy pills and thinking somehow they can keep going on without making cuts to their spending. So, there has been very little control. We're undershooting on spending. We came into this crisis with a debt binge. And unfortunately, like many countries in Africa, whilst this infrastructure was needed, a lot of it there was massive overspending, and there is simply no ROI at the moment. Our biggest project, for example, the railway, is stopping in the middle of nowhere in Naivasha. The whole point of that railway was you were going to knit together all the regional countries. So it's a very challenging moment for Kenya.
Yes, it is. It's a very challenging time. But speaking to the monetary side of the street, Ali, let's cross the street from fiscal to monetary. What's your take on the latest hold interest rate decision by NJOROGE-LED and the rest of his team at the central bank?
So I think very highly of the central bank governor. I think he was voted Central Banker of the Year in Africa last year, and deservedly so. He's been ahead of the curve. He brought interest rates down sharply to 7%. But, really the elephant in the room is the fiscal problem. And he can only do so much with the monetary situation. He's done what he can. He's tried as hard as he can to stimulate the economy. I think he's got a few bullets left, maybe another 50, 75 basis points if he needs to pull that out. But for now, he's steering a very tricky path. The banking sector's been under a lot of pressure. We've restructured about 1.52 trillion shillings of bank loans. And really, the banks are looking for a recovery. Otherwise, they're going to have to restructure again. It will be another Groundhog Day of restructuring. But, I give him full credit. He's a top-notch policymaker, but dealing with a very tough hand.
Yeah, dealing with a very tough situation, Ali, with the banks. So, NJOROGE also spoke about the state of the banks in that monetary policy where interest rate was left unchanged, but they talked about the loan book of Kenyan banks. How much more can you tell us? We just getting a report this evening from the Vice President, Middle East and Africa of the International Finance Corporation in an interview with Africa CEO Forum Digest that, that African banks seem to have done much better with this pandemic crisis than they were in the past period of 2008 and 2009. But the Kenyan story, is it different for the banks?
No, I think that was a fair point. I think, our banks over more than a decade, 2008, 2009, have become much more sophisticated, have stronger balance sheets. Regulators have demanded that they bulk up. So, you've got much stronger indigenous banks across the continent from east to west. So if you look at it on that sort of timeline, it's a different story. But I think if you look at it over a 12 to 24 month story, it's been a very tough and rocky period for Kenyan banks. The tourism industry has been dead, so you can imagine lending to those guys has not been good. And it's demanded a lot of restructuring. But really, the way out of this is an economic recovery. And the question is, will the vaccines give us that? How quickly might we see that? And I think a lot depends on those judgments and on how that pans out.
Interesting, Ali, that despite the problem, KCB is still moving ahead, wants to buy 2 banks in Tanzania and Rwanda. Looks like you guys still have a lot of fire under the hood. 30 seconds.
Yeah, so Kenya Commercial Bank, Equity, other banks have been very aggressive in rolling out a regional presence. Interestingly, I think Nigerian banks have done the same. that, in these downturns, it's an opportunity for the bigger boys to buy cheaply and to add and build out their profile. And I think that's what the context you've got to see what KCB is doing. It's most welcome.
Ali, thank you so much. You got to go to bed. Thank you so much for your time tonight from Nairobi, Kenya. Have a good night. The CEO and founder at Rich Frontiers Management.